Today we're building a DIY farmhouse planter stand using table legs from Osborne. This is an easy project to complete and is perfect for beginner to professional woodworkers. Stay tuned for a full tutorial. For this project we're using 3 of Osborne's English Country end table legs and oak part 1230 on our website. We're also using Osborne's edge banding and some plywood from a local hardware store. I'll start by measuring and cutting the plywood to an 18-inch by 18-inch square. This will be the diameter of our planter, but this dimension can be adjusted depending on your preference. We can cut this to size on our table saw to get started. Before moving on, I'll check that the cut is square and then use a straight edge to create a mark in the center of the panel. This will allow us to use a compass so that we can make a perfect circle for the base of our planter stand. Next, I can place the anchor point of the compass on the center mark and adjust the width to be flush with the edges of the panel. This will ensure that we use the full 18-inch diameter and only require us to cut the corners off for a perfect circle. Once our shape is traced out, we can move to the bandsaw to cut off the corners of the plywood. You can also use a router or jig saw depending on the tools that you have available. Just be sure to stay as accurate as possible to minimize touch-ups later. After the profile is cut, you can touch up the edges lightly with a sander to remove any imperfections. Be sure to keep your sander parallel with the edges of the plywood to avoid burning through the top veneer. Next, I need to mark the circle into thirds since we're only using 3 legs for this planter stand. To do this, start by marking a line in the center of your circle. Next, place the anchor point of your compass on the end of the line, making sure that it's set to the same width as before. Then create a mark where it meets the edges of the plywood. Finally, grab a straight edge and mark a line from the center mark to the edge marks we just created. The top 3 lines now show even thirds for the circle and can be used as a reference for placing your table legs. Next, we can move on to notching the top block of our table legs. I'll measure 5 inches down from the top of the leg and create a line in the center that represents my cut line. We'll be removing half of the top block from this leg, but I'm leaving enough material at the bottom to give support for the plywood base. I chose to cut this out on the bandsaw as well, but you can use a jig saw or a table saw depending on what you have available. Since the cut will be seen on our final assembly, I chose to sand this area to 150 grit to remove any imperfections. The rest of the table leg is already sanded to 150 grit before it leaves and is shipped to your door. Now that our table legs are notched, we can place them on the base and mark for the cutouts on our plywood. Notching the plywood base is an optional step, but I do think it helps the overall look of the planter stand. We can line up the center marks of the legs on the lines that we created earlier and trace out the shape of the modified top block. Once again, I'll make these cuts using a bandsaw, making sure to be as accurate as possible. Now that our cuts are made, it's time to assemble the main part of the stand. I'll add some wood glue to the area of the top block that will be in contact with the plywood base. Next, we can place the base on the cutouts that we created earlier, making sure that each leg is seated properly. There may be a little bit of flex depending on the thickness of your plywood, so make sure that everything is square before securing. Next, I'll pre-drill for some wood screws using a 2-step bit into the base of the top block. This will allow us to use wood plugs to hide any attachment points on the top surface of the stand. Depending on the table leg that you choose for your project, be sure to use a proper length screw to avoid splitting the table leg. Next, I want to add some 1x material to the underside of the stand to remove any flex in the plywood. I need to cut the middle angle of these boards to 30 degrees since we're only working with 3 table legs. The length will be determined by the diameter of your base and the size of your table legs, so be sure to take accurate measurements before making cuts. For one of the boards, I chose to create a notch that will accept the other two boards just to make for an easier installation. Just make sure all of these angles are cut to 30 degrees for a proper assembly. You can see here how the support structure will assemble on the underside of the stand. Next, I'll add a pocket hole on the square end of the boards that we'll use to attach this to the top block. We'll add some wood glue to the boards in the areas that touch the base and place the boards in their proper location. Next, we can add a wood screw into the pocket holes that we created, which will secure this to the top blocks of the table legs. Then you can add a proper length wood screw into each of the boards, securing it to the plywood base. This will help strengthen and remove flex from the plywood. Next, we can plug these screw holes up top using some wood glue and some matching red oak wood plugs. Now that our planter stand is assembled, the final step is to add edge banding to the plywood edges. Osborne offers pre-glued edge banding kits in a range of sizes and wood species for your project. You can easily cut the edge banding to length using scissors and apply to the plywood edge using a hot iron. If you're interested in a full tutorial on how to install edge banding, you can check out the video above or in the description. Once the edge banding has dried, you can trim it to size using a razor blade or a sharp chisel. You can lightly sand the plywood top to make sure that the edge banding is flush with the surface. Both the plywood veneer and the edge banding are incredibly thin, so be careful when sanding your project to avoid any burn through. Now that the planter stand is fully assembled, we can add a quick coat of stain to complete the project. Thank you for joining me for this video. If you're interested in any of the products used in this build, you can check out the links in the description below. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time in the Builder Studio.